For years, territorial conflicts between India and Pakistan have had far-reaching effects on the rest of South Asia and have influenced regional cooperation, especially Sino-Indian relationship. It is one of the factors that has dampened India's understanding of China's One Belt, One Road initiative. At the same time, according to the 2016 Global Terrorism Index, terrorism in Pakistan has spread from the border region to many other parts of the country. What can the international community do to help tackle terrorism in South Asia? Earlier, I spoke with Ashley Tellis, a senior fellow with the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. I started by asking his views on India's reluctance to put its weight behind the One Belt, One Road initiative.
The Indian view of the Belt and Road is shaped primarily by the China-Pakistan economic corridor. So if you take the China-Pakistan economic corridor aside for the moment, there is nothing in the Belt and Road concept that should cause India any particular anxiety. So the China-Pakistan economic corridor is the focal point of Indian discomfort. And the discomfort primarily arises because it passes through territories that India claims. And so I think from an Indian point of view, if China were to take initiatives that would involve greater involvement, say, in the Indian part of Kashmir, economic initiatives, I think that would be a wonderful way forward to assuage some of these anxieties. I think part of India's concern is that China does not want to interact with Indian Kashmir because it sees that as disputed territory, but is willing to work with Pakistan on the parts of Kashmir that Pakistan controls. So this is the challenge, I think, going forward.
But China has reiterated its position on the issue itself has not changed,
yes,
right, despite the project that it's undertaking with the Pakistani side. Do you think there is a communication problem, or how can this issue be resolved so that, you know, the project can move forward and maybe all three countries can benefit?
I think there is a communication problem, but more than a communication problem, there is a political problem. I think China needs to engage economically with India in developing projects that can be implemented in Indian Kashmir as well. And if that is done, then I think it opens the door to a greater understanding about what is happening on the Pakistan side of the border.
Pakistan is seen as the most dangerous place in the world by some officials in the United States. But Pakistan itself also suffers heavily. Statistics show a total of 35,000 Pakistanis have been killed between 2001 and 2011. So what do you think should be done to solve that problem in that part of the world?
Pakistan is going to remain a very difficult arena for counterterrorism, because as you point out, it is simultaneously a victim, but it is also a perpetrator. And it's a perpetrator in the sense that for many decades, the Pakistani state supported terrorist organizations that operated out of Pakistani soil. Now that position is changing, but it's changing far too slowly for policymakers in the United States and for policymakers in India. So I think the challenge that all of Pakistan's friends have is, how does one help Pakistan make that transition completely from being part of the problem to being part of the solution? It will require patience, it will require time, but I think there is a need for Pakistan to show far greater effort that Pakistan itself has to make. And that unfortunately has not been consistent.
Is Pakistan's problem really rooted in Pakistan, or pretty much as a kind of spill out of the conflict in Afghanistan? Because we have to take that into the picture here. How do you look at the fundamental solution to the problem there?
There is no doubt that many of the problems that Pakistan faces today have come out of Afghanistan. But it is equally true that Pakistan made important strategic choices during the conflict in Afghanistan and afterwards with respect to support for terrorist groups. So for example, even as you and I are speaking today, Pakistan continues to support the Haqqani network, which is part of the groups that are attacking the government of Afghanistan. Pakistan continues to support the Lashkar-e-Taiba, which is a terrorist group attacking India. and so on and so forth. So the challenge for Pakistan is how these groups had a certain logic and a certain purpose at a certain point in time. Now they have ceased to have that purpose. Right now, they are causing nothing but problems to Pakistan. So how can Islamabad make that shift from slowly reducing support and finding alternative solutions to these groups that it favored for many, many decades?
How do you look at the position of China, the Chinese government refusing to agree to put the head of one of the very prominent terrorist organizations that you have just mentioned? What do you think of China's rationale behind that decision?
I think China's rationale is, I can understand the logic, but I think it is not convincing. It's not convincing because there is an international consensus now that Hafiz Saeed, who is the head of the LET, is a genuine threat to international stability. And so I think China should rethink its position on that question, because it is actually beginning to undermine Indian trust in China's perceptions and Chinese objectives. And I don't think that is productive for a strong Sino-Indian relationship.
In terms of anti-terrorism, China does have problem with many Western countries because of the double standard that are often seen. For instance, after the Kunming terrorist attack, a lot of Western media journalists simply refused to call it a terrorist attack, whereas, over a dozen people killed, hundreds of innocent people wounded. China insists that, this is terrorism, just like what people suffer in London most recently. What do you think of the consequences of having this kind of double standard as a result in international efforts to collaborate on fighting terrorism?
I think we need to get rid of the business of double standards once and for all. We should have a very clear criterion that any premeditated targeting of innocent civilians, whatever the political cause, is unacceptable. And if we all agree to live by that standard, I think the problem resolves itself. I think it arises when some people would assert that targeting civilians is tolerable if it is done by freedom fighters.
Or by people who hold grudges because...
against the state.
Yeah.
And my view is, irrespective of what your objectives are, what is at issue here is the means used. And as long as the means involve the targeting of innocents, I believe it should be morally and politically unacceptable.
Why is it so difficult then for this standard to be adopted by countries in the world, in a unified manner?
Because I think different countries have different stakes in the internal disputes of others. And if the stakes advance the interests of some countries, they find it difficult to point to the actions of some groups as terrorism. It comes down at the end of the day to politics.
What about the potential help that anti-poverty efforts can help on solving this problem? Basically, the philosophy of the Chinese government is, okay, terrorism is difficult to fight, but let's fight it from a different perspective, not using military means, but rather by helping the people coming out of poverty. When they have jobs, when they have aspiration for the future, they probably would not resort to violence.
I think it is a part of the answer, but it's never the full answer, because most modern terrorism is not motivated by economic grievances. Most modern terrorism is motivated by political grievances. And the solution to a political grievance, I think, is a political solution. Now, part of that may involve some degree of economic assistance or economic outreach, but I don't think it substitutes for political engagement. And so going back to the issues of conversation, negotiation, dialogue is far more productive rather than focusing on economic solutions primarily.